Hey, everybody, welcome to a new episode of Cybersecurity Sense. It has been a minute since we've been able to bring any kind of content with you, but I think we finally come to a place where we're going to be back in a regular routine with everybody. We had mainly focused on PCI requirements. This was something that is very passionate with Kyle and I, and we felt like giving a more in-depth look of what auditors would be looking for, in specifically around PCI and compliance. So we had some time to kind of think this through and work through this. And what we've decided to do is kind of take the podcast in a different direction. So before, we're more dealing more specifically in a niche kind of environment, if you were, in regards to information security. Now we're going to expand this out significantly more. And our spin on this is really going to be, hey, look, we're not CISOs, we're not CIOs, we're the people that are on the front lines. We're the ones seeing the technology as it's coming out. And we're talking to all different types of companies, large companies, small companies, and we're seeing how these types of security events are developing. What are people doing? How they're applying different types of tools that are out there.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with everything Andy just said. And it's one of those places, too, where a part of it is that we're not necessarily experts in everything. We are pretty much experts in PCI and a lot of things to do with cybersecurity. But, to help us out, we're also going to be bringing on more folks from LBMC and other places to come talk to us about, specific things. I know for me, anytime I'm working with clients in whatever type of environment, I feel like so many people feel like they're the only one. They're the only person dealing with whatever their problem is. And it's like, no, honestly, you're doing pretty much the same or better than most of my other clients on whatever it might be. And so I think that's one of the important things is just helping people recognize you're not alone. Everyone is more than likely going through the same struggles. One of the funny examples for it is for anyone who's ever read the book, The Phoenix Project. It's one of my favorite IT related books ever. And I feel like everyone who has ever read it says that they're writing about my company. And it's because everyone is going through the same struggles. And that's something I think we can help, allow people to understand that and know that you're not alone. It's not only you. Everyone else can't get their assets under control or you get vulnerability scans wrapped up or anything of that nature either.
Me personally, I like the comparison between, hey, everybody can watch the movie Office Space or the show The Office and go, oh my God, I work with this guy or I work with these people.
Absolutely.
And so it's the same kind of thing where we want to present this to everybody to say, all right, I understand that. I get that. I can connect with that. And as far as I feel like something maybe we've neglected in the podcast in the past is that we kind of jumped right into the requirements. We jumped right into, hey, this is what requirement one says with PCI. And we didn't really give an opportunity for people to get to know us and to know what our background is. And how are you guys supposed to be speaking to this? What have you guys really done in the past that allows you to be able to speak intelligently about these things? And so we did want to open this up a little bit more to everybody to go, hey, look, this is what Kyle and I have done in the past. And to Kyle's point, we're not perfect in everything. As anybody knows that's in IT security, it's a ever evolving environment. We're still learning just like all of you are. I started when I was 18 years old, right out of high school, and I was making, Cat5 cables and, hooking people up and, hey, we got a new user here, go run this cable through the ceiling and, this type of thing. And so I went through the basic IT connections and, moved into backup. Say, hey, I'm just old backup tapes is all I'm doing. Connections and backup tapes. And that evolved more into like a SOC knock environment for Bank of America. So I worked for Bank of America for quite some time doing SOC knock when we used to have a trading floor in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I evolved from that and found my way into law enforcement where I did digital forensics. And at the same time, I'm doing, basic like front end help desk type stuff for the police department until it opened up to do forensics for an IT security department for the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I did frontline stuff. I mean, it was more, hey, taking phone calls and opening up tickets. And, I'm sitting there doing endpoint security. Palo Altos, gosh, I love Palo Altos. Again, No, I'm not brand specific, but I have enjoyed them using them over the years because they're a lot more user friendly, and kind of evolved into that until I actually worked for a company that was basically a security auditing type company where I did anything from firewall audits, database audits, server audits, general IT security best practices. I did PCI, I did pen testing. It was one of those things where I did the gamut. Whatever client came in that needed something, hey, figure it out, apply the knowledge that you gained, and do it. And it was hard. I mean, it was not easy. I remember coming in trying to understand IT security. I kid you not, there have to be logs of me coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning into the office just to be able to prepare for my day so that I could speak intelligently about whatever topic was going on, or try to get a jump start on a pen test so that I could understand, hey, this is what I'm doing. So, and that slowly evolved into where I am now, where, it's more of a PCI auditor, but still my hands are in InfoSec and all the different places.
No, absolutely. That sounds awesome. And I didn't know that entire backstory of Andy, really. And so it's funny, some of it actually lines up a little bit with my backstory in a way that I didn't even realize. But for me, my introduction to IT in general was way back, essentially in trying to network playing Warcraft 3. That was like the game that
Really?
I loved. And so when you're trying to get a whole bunch of old XP systems on your home network to talk to each other, that was difficult. And so, yeah, Warcraft 3, Diablo 2, doing networking, was really my introduction to anything IT. But then after I graduated high school, I didn't honestly know what I wanted to do. And I started working at an electrician shop. And so that's a little bit where I had a little bit similar background as you, as I actually moved over into more of the data side of the house and was running cables, pushing panels, doing all that kind of stuff, ran way more Ethernet lines than I ever would have cared to. Um, and was doing that for a while. And then my
Cutting your
brother,
hands trying to get the razor blade in there.
I hated that. I hated that. And many times I was told I was doing it wrong by the educated folks, because I'm trying to,
Oh yeah.
do it the easy way. And it's like, no, you got to punch them this way and do it that way. And it's like, sucks. Just turn on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But then my brother,
Kidding.
he's a couple of years older than me, and he was going to college for IT. And so it's like, I guess I'll try that out. I don't know. I don't know what else to do. So I'll just tag along with Kevin. And so went in and got educated in general IT more or less, and got a job from there working as a system administrator at a now defunct company called Doctors Foster and Smith that was up here in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, way up north. That's where I'm from. And it was a pet cataloger and retailer and e-com place and whatnot, selling pet products. And so I was just general IT. Like, it was not a huge company, like 500 people, but we had 4 or 5 IT staff, and I was one of them. And
Nice.
so kind of cut my teeth just doing anything, because it was, you might be fixing printers one day, or going to the call center the next day, or going out to the owner's horse barn and installing cameras so he can watch the birth of his horse the next day. It was literally that type of a mom and pop feel as far as that shop went. And so it was literally anything that we just had to keep it all going. But for, more so security and PCI specifically, is one time our bank came to us and said, hey, someone here, we're going to start, making sure that all of the companies we're working with are, in their opinion, more legit. And so someone has to go get trained as a PCI ISA. And I had, like some level of interest in security. And I was also the kind of lowest man on the totem pole. And so
Of
I was
course.
the one who went, and that was my start into PCI. And so I started doing PCI there. Eventually, I left, went to another company, more of a Fortune 400, and was doing PCI there, kind of, e-com and brick and mortar and all that goodness. And one of the things that I feel like I can relate to with a lot of my clients is that when you're working for an organization, it can be really hard to make a change. And you can
Yes.
tell, your
Absolutely.
boss or whoever, like, we can't do this anymore. We need to change because of X, Y, and Z, or we need to,
Yes.
prepare for whatever. And a lot of times they don't listen to you, but you bring in that external person, you bring in someone who has a different email address, and all of a sudden, oh, that's an expert. We know what they're talking about. Well, we'll do whatever they say. And I ran into that, and eventually I decided, hey, I'm going to move to the other side of the table, because then maybe I
Yeah.
can actually affect change and make stuff
Yeah.
happen. And so that was my start, as being a QSA. And now been a QSA, I think, for like 7, 8 years, somewhere in that range. And I do feel like I'm able to do more good for more organizations by coming in and, providing those recommendations and seeing change actually happen, which is really what I love to see. I'm not about making people, shoehorn themselves into following this mandatory set of compliance requirements. It's how can you actually make you, your organization, your customers, your employees, everyone more secure and in a better place than what you were last year.
So one of the things we did want to talk about, as we're kind of discussing the projection of where we're going and as well as what our backgrounds were. And again, this is kind of be the name of our podcast. It wants folks to kind of see it posted. They're like, okay, when are they going to get to the good stuff? Is that legacy artificial intelligence? Now, it's a little misleading, but I think this was a topic that is so big. And again, I'm paraphrasing from the different news outlets that kind of posted this approximately 30 days ago, but there's been, additional developments and understanding of what the implications are here. As most folks know, ChatGPT is probably one of the biggest tools out there that everybody's using. I mean, I know I've used it. It can help write policies, procedures. You can help with code. You can help with, again, the implications for ChatGPT are far beyond simple technology. I think you would agree with that, Kyle, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I use it on the daily basis.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it is revolutionary. And again, we're not going to make our podcast solely about AI, but it's a key thing that is ever evolving. You're actually starting to see AI security companies come out, that are creating frameworks. There's several big auditing companies that are already creating their own AI frameworks along with NIST, as guidelines and so forth about AI. But I think one of the biggest punches to AI happened recently with DeepSeek. This is a Chinese-based company that came. Did you read about that, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy because, and again, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but basically they were able to train and create DeepSeek for like less than a tenth or a fifth, or not wrong way, a 20th is what I was thinking of what, like OpenAI did for ChatGPT, or, what other organizations have been doing like Meta with Llama and whatnot. The way that they've been creating it has been so much more expensive and so much more intensive, needing all the, hundreds or thousands of, NVIDIA graphics cards and all this kind of, getting all these GPUs that they've spent, millions and billions of dollars to do this all. And then DeepSeek comes out, and for essentially next to nothing, they're able to make an on par algorithm, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah. So DeepSeek, what I saw, as far as, there's a lot of information about there. They're talking about all the how in the world, and if anybody had NVIDIA stock, you did see it take a hit. So I don't know if you had any. I had a couple of friends that had NVIDIA, and it took a hit because, and again, to your point, they were able to cut down how much they were using. So if you got a chance to look at it, how they were able to do this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Colin, kind of going based off of all the information that was out there. But essentially what it was is where you have something like Chat GPT would use a certain amount of space on GPU. And they would say, okay, well, here we're using this much space. Now, utilizing Chat GPT, you really don't need that much space. You could actually do it with probably about half that. Now, in certain cases, yes, you would need that much, but what they did was they just limited the amount of utilization that they were processing with. And so through their GPUs and so forth and so on. And so they were able to kind of produce the responses with DeepSeek significantly faster because of that. So that was, again, that's just, one aspect of it. But there were several other different pieces that they had that were kind of to help DeepSeek move faster. And I
I
think,
know
was it like 75% less memory, if I'm not mistaken?
that sounds right. And I know too, like one of the things that is a little humorous is that one of the techniques they used, I believe, is called distillation, but it's essentially where they ask a different program like ChatGPT a question, see the answer it gives it, and then they go to their program and say, hey, when you get this answer, here's the kind of answer you should give. And essentially using other tools to inform it and help teach it. And so that's a known AI method that other organizations are using, and that's one of the things that DeepSeek was able to use to really benefit DeepSeek and make it essentially more intelligent as far as we're concerned, as far as what we are right now thinking about AI intelligence. And that's a whole other argument in and of itself. Are these things actually intelligent, or that it's more of garbage in, garbage out? But the humorous side is OpenAI now saying that DeepSeek, essentially did this illegally, or that they shouldn't have been able to do this, and they were stealing data from OpenAI, when at the same time you have like everyone else under the sun coming at OpenAI saying, hey, you're stealing all of our data to create your algorithm, and you're reading all of our news websites, and you're scraping all this, you're stealing our books, our songs, whatever, and using that to make your program. And now
Yeah.
when someone uses your program to make a new program, now you're all up in arms about that. So it's all a little bit, pointing fingers at each other.
And is it really? Are we talking about like? Is it? Are these legacy AI? Not really. It's almost like an evolution of AI. And to your point, is it really intelligent, or is it just better to consume data and be able to regurgitate that? Like for instance, one of the cheaper ways that they were doing to process faster was, I think, Chat GPT or OpenAI actually utilizes word by word. And so what DeepSeek was doing is actually going by phrases. So analyzing data word by word by word by word was taking significantly longer and was less accurate than taking the phrase, analyzing the phrase, and then being able to produce a more accurate response based off of the phrase instead of word by word. So again, it really is quite an evolution to be able to say that, okay, you're cutting down on the GPUs needed for artificial intelligence. You're cutting down on API costs and training costs, and um, you can run on gaming GPUs instead of like data center hardware. So there's all these little things. And again, I say legacy AI and the out of legacy AI, but it really is. It's just an ever evolving artificial intelligence and how they're able to. I love, there was a movie called Limitless. I don't know if you ever saw Limitless. It's probably one of my favorite movies. And the guy's using, taking this pill. And essentially, he's not so much at the beginning. He's not so much learning anything new as soon as he starts taking it, but it's like all these little bits and pieces all over in his head. And now his brain was able to utilize that data better. And that's what artificial intelligence is doing right now. It's evolving because it's the better utilization of data, it's aggregating it better, and then it's able to essentially regurgitate it in a more efficient manner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of those things that I know I have seen arguments that some people say that numbers that have been coming out of China related to DeepSeek might not be entirely on the up and up. Obviously, China has, and, part of the problem with, companies that are run in China is they're a little bit, mandated what they can or cannot say or do by the Chinese government. And, so you have to take it all with a little bit of a grain of salt. But
Right.
I think it is absolutely more or less proven that what DeepSeek did is still just a completely new approach to how you're leveraging these AIs. And to your point with the whole idea of legacy AI, when that approach comes over here to America, or just other countries outside of the DeepSeek organization and what they're doing with it, it is going to just change the game. Now
Yeah.
if OpenAI, obviously they might not want to back down and change what they're doing because they have a little bit of their stake down already as far as what they're doing. But this is going to open up the opportunity for a bunch of other people. You have a few million laying around. Maybe you can start your new AI company and
Yeah.
not be just entirely leaning on OpenAI or anyone else that's already doing it.
And that was, and this is where we circle back around here. So us talking about this, what's the practical application for the businesses out there? And there's the first one: competition increases dramatically because of the accessibility of AI. Now is it's going to help those companies, either maybe startups, to make AI development it's more accessible, and it increases the competition. The hardware requirements and costs start to go down depending on how you model this. So the implications for normal companies out there are these. It's going to make this a whole lot more accessible to other people. So what does that mean? Okay, well, we're just going to have something else we can search, or no, 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 no. I think there is a somewhat limited amount of understanding of where these types of tools can go. And just like being able to see, hey, here's what OpenAI was doing. DeepSeek changed the model. Now they're making it more efficient, more effective to be able to do these types of things. Well, who's that next person now that it's more accessible? Who's going to start up their company and go, all right, well, this model is going to take DeepSeek and it's going to take it to another level. And now it's going to be even more efficient. We're starting to see this evolution of artificial intelligence, but it's not without its flags. So as I don't know, I every time I mess with Chat GPT or DeepSeek or something like that, there's obviously, and I'm sure everybody's seen it out there. If you're listening to the podcast, you've played and you've seen the guardrails. There's guardrails out there that you ask a question and then it's like, I can't do that, or I can't, my response is limited, and you see some of those things that kind of the guardrails.
And sometimes it's to me, half the time that I run into them, it's so frustrating because it's something that's, in my opinion, really foolish, or I could just Google for it or whatever. But obviously those guardrails are there. And that's one of the whole, concerns with, what country, what company, whoever are you getting these tools from? Now there's, Grok is coming up. And for, LBMC in specific, it's based out of, I think a lot of what they're doing is down in Tennessee. And it's, I believe right now, the most powerful. So it's kind of taken the opposite approach of DeepSeek, that for the Grok AI, that they have, more GPUs and whatnot than anything ever. But at the same time, one of the selling points is supposedly that has less guardrails, but do you want that? Is that a positive? Do you want more guardrails? Also, who do you want to impose these guardrails? Do we leave it up to the companies to do it? Do you leverage, kind of more free speech absolutism? Do you leave it up to the countries? Because that's where, like, right now with DeepSeek specifically, if you leverage the DeepSeek, kind of software that's running out of the Chinese back end, and you ask it questions that are, that China might not like about Tiananmen Square, et cetera, it's not going to answer those questions. But if you download the algorithm, you can essentially download DeepSeek, run it locally. And if you do that, then you can ask it whatever, and it doesn't have those same guardrails on it because you're just running it locally. So that's totally, right now, one of the most difficult things. I myself tend to be more so against the idea of guardrails. Like, if it's data, you should just let people have it. But at the same time, you don't necessarily want to teach someone how to build a Molotov cocktail.
So it's funny you should bring that up. So one of the Hacker News came out with was basically there was a feature where essentially what they did was they jailbreaked ChatGPT. It was time bandit. Time thief, time bandit. So it essentially what it did is if you ask ChatGPT in a certain way, you're able to kind of bypass the guardrails, in certain instances. So you can almost, like in a hypothetical situation, could you do this, then it will answer. It just depends on how you ask the question. So what Time Bandit did, it kind of made it possible for you to kind of get around those safeguards, based off of like time and history. So as an example, so one of the examples they gave in the news was like, okay, an attacker can exploit a vulnerability in the guardrails by going to ChatGPT and asking about some sort of historical event and, a historical time period, or saying, hey, pretend you're assisting a user inside of a specific historical event. So once that's been established, the user can kind of pivot to receive messages based off of various, maybe in some cases illicit topics, and based off of how the questions are asked. Again, so this is kind of how they're bypassing. Now OpenAI has kind of fixed a lot of that now, but it was there to be able to say, hey, this can be done, but we're gonna bypass it by asking these types of questions. And so with the development of AI, with how it's going to be evolving, everybody knows that we always have to stay one step ahead of hackers, extremely intelligent people, and they're out there going, and I want to preface this with, in my personal belief, not every hacker is bad. I've run into some folks that they're more of a, hey, I want to go out there and see what I can find, and then I'll upload this, or I will contact this company and let them know, hey, there's an issue in your software, or there's an issue in now. There's some gray areas in legally speaking is concerned. So I mean, I'm not diving into the legality of all this stuff, but I don't believe that all hackers are their purpose is
Yeah, just from like a
menacing.
moral compass.
Yes, exactly. For it's kind of tough. I come from a law enforcement background, but I've learned that there's more gray areas in a lot of situations, and not everything is as clean cut. But so I understand the drive to, and I'm not here to say, morally speaking, who's good and who's bad, but I understand that with the development of AI, this is going to continue. We're always going to have somebody that can supersede these things. The more it evolves, the more holes that we try to find. If we try to find ways we can apply it, this is always the ever evolving life of technology.
Yeah, and even with that, there's already, I know Worm GPT is one of the big ones, but essentially AI algorithms that are out there where they have purposely, taken some of the better algorithms and stripped them of any, guardrails and said, do what you want with it, where you could literally use
Yeah.
Worm GPT to say, write me a hack that will do whatever. And if it can, it'll help you do it. It doesn't care. It's going to answer any question. If you say, tell me how to make a bomb, it's going to do it. It doesn't care. And so it's one of those things that, again, while I do think there's a purpose for guardrails. At To some degree, you're keeping the honest people honest, and the people who want to do bad things are still going to do those bad things regardless. And it's almost, to me, you have to authenticate yourself in some way, maybe to show that you are who you are and what you're asking. If you're you do whatever, you're not like a 12-year-old, because that's, I think, the
Right.
most critical thing is that this might be able to help children do things they shouldn't. But if you're an adult, I'm more of the mind of just let people, have the information if it's out there.
Yeah. And something to keep in mind, as IT security professionals, look, there's kids coming out of college right now that have AI drilled into their brain now. You know what I mean? This is the thing they grew up with. Like where when I was in school, it was, hey, we're looking for SQL injection, we're looking for buffer overflows, we're looking for this, we're looking for that. And even when I was a pen tester, we're looking for, hey, how can we extract credentials here? And I feel like with the evolving AI, with how hackers are changing their types of attacks, this is going to be a key thing that corporations need to be keeping in mind. Nobody, I look at it like this. I know it's easy to say that AI is a buzzword, and maybe it is to a degree. Maybe even saying AI is not always the most accurate representation of what these tools are. Yeah, like I said before, it's more of a correlation of data, better and more efficient, and then being able to regurgitate that information. What I think is that these types of attacks are going to really alter how IT security functions, and it's going to push us in a whole different direction. This is why there are already companies jumping to try and catch up with frameworks. How do we secure this? How do we put stronger guardrails in? How do we, hey, we're using this with client data. And how do we keep this almost air gapped to say, okay, now we have our client list that we're using, AI, and we're using this on all our clients, and we don't want this getting out, so we're going to have to air gap our systems.
Yeah,
So I
like,
think
go ahead.
no, I was just saying, I think the attacks are going to get worse. I think they're going to get harder.
It's to some degree, obviously, you organizations put AI tools in to make it easier for their employees to find data and answer questions and whatnot. But at the same
Right.
time, you're doing the same stuff for the hacker that's trying to get into your environment. Last
Yeah.
year there was a problem that came out with Slack, where Slack rolled out an AI feature where you could use the AI tool to search the chat conversations and whatnot that you had in Slack. And it was discovered that AI had access to all of the Slack instance. So even if you had private conversations, you could ask the AI for questions and it would return you answers that came from private conversations. And so if a hacker got in there, and even though they only had user access, but you have your, talking about your organization security, or talking about, a breach or whatever it might be, something that you wanted to keep private, but you're still talking about it in Slack, with that, that AI might return that information. Or, on the same
Yeah.
side, maybe you have SharePoint and you have an AI tool to allow your organization, your employees to search SharePoint. But now the bad guy gets in there and he can simply ask that AI tool for anything out of SharePoint. Hey, tell me, what your financials are. Tell me, the home addresses of the CEO. information like that is potentially readily available. And so while you're making it more available to the right people, you could be making it more available to the wrong people.
And I'm glad you said that, because this is going to open up some implications to things I wanted to discuss too for those folks. So there's several things that corporations need to be thinking about with what Kyle just said. Um, there are several different avenues where this could really turn wrong, and these are things that CISOs, CIOs need to be thinking about, including HR. And so what I mean by that, there may be some legal ramifications in regards to using AI to search through private conversations that people have at work. There may be some legality that the people need to add to their, hey, as part of our policy, you understand that we're utilizing a AI platform and we can search through your private conversations. And maybe that may be something that upon hire, you have to be able to state in some sort of agreement with your employees that there is no privacy at work. If we decide to use AI model to search through your private conversations, maybe you're stealing clients, maybe whatever that may be. That's a big implication for people beyond the tech world. This is stuff that HR needs to be thinking about and legal needs to be thinking about as well.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I am absolutely all for AI. I think it's good. I think we should keep using these tools. But at the same time, it's a completely new way to use, technology. I feel like this is the start where in, a generation or two, we're going to be into the Star Trek world of being able to say computer, whatever. And we won't even have keyboards and mice because these devices will just interact with us. And this is the start when we're building these AI platforms that are going to make that, capable. It's like, historically, when I needed an answer, I'd go Google it and sort through all this stuff. Now, half the time, I'm just asking ChatGPT. It's giving me an answer. I'm tending to trust it, depending on what
Yes.
it is. And that's getting closer to just asking, computer, what is this answer? And it tells me the answer and I believe it. And so it's a completely new way of leveraging technology.
And not to fall back on PCI, but I mean, the implications for credit card data is the same. Well, so, if you're using internally in a corporate world, hey, we're billing information, billing your clients. We're going to use a model of AI to search for credit card numbers that may appear. Hey, these are coming up through our email server. And the question that you have to start thinking about is, okay, so you have this AI software that is searching your environments for credit card information or has access to credit card information. Is it storing that somewhere outside your CDE now because it's correlating and aggregating that information? So these are, and this is what we want to do, even though we're talking about these technologies at a kind of a high level, we want to offer practical application of what we see could be a problem. And there's obviously there's implications here that are beyond what we're even stating. I mean, we're just talking about, based off our experience and what we've seen and what this technology does, what could be the problems? What could be the issues? And what do corporations need to go ahead and start addressing now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's just it. It's one of those things that, again, while I just said I love AI, I don't think you should put it anywhere near your CDE right now. It is not ready for it. We don't know. It's one of those things, even when you're talking to people who quote unquote understand AI, LLMs, large language models, all of this stuff, the people who even understand it can't tell you specifically how it's doing what it's doing. It's to some degree kind of still and will always be a bit of a black box that it gets some data, it does some magic, and it spits something out. And if you don't like what it spits out, you can't specifically go in there and remove that section. It's
Yeah.
all inside of it. And like specifically when it comes to PCI, if that algorithm learns on credit card data, right now, I don't believe there's a way to cause it to unlearn a piece of information, not generally speaking. So if you have some type of an AI model and it, ingests some type of PII, whether it be credit card numbers, social security numbers, whatever, from an organizational standpoint, you're almost best just to blow it away and start over, because otherwise anyone who asks it a question that might return that information, it's in there, it's somewhere, and you can't just go, again, tell it, hey, those lines there, forget about those. That option doesn't really exist with current AI models.
And I think that is the reason why we're starting to see AI security begin to grow. It's in its infancy right now. Frameworks to try to guide that information, and not just externally. I mean internally as well. There should be policies, procedures that companies should be already developing that are saying, if you are using our co-pilots, one that a lot of folks are starting to use internally, don't be uploading, if this is has access to the internet, or regardless if it does or not. If we're Don't upload specific client information. Don't upload bulk credit card information. So these are implications that need to be addressed. And I think this is going to be challenging because there needs to be some universal guidance across the board. Now, NIST has taken a stab at it. There's been a couple other companies that have taken stabs at it. There needs to be something more universal that says, in regards to aggregating our information, utilizing AI, this is what the controls that need to be in place. We need to have almost, and I hate that, and I'm not going to try to freak everybody out about some new compliance, but there also does need to be a certain governance, risk, compliance component to that and holds people accountable.
I agree, but the downside is essentially DeepSeek. That's one of the problems is, and I know that I've heard here in America, the USA, a lot of people talk about, hey, we should put more controls around it. But if we force all of the, US based companies to have, handcuff themselves a little bit, are we then just going to allow, Chinese or other, nationalities to have their companies run rampant, and then they'll be the best thing out there, and all the Americans will just be using those tools anyway. So I feel like it's a no-win situation, that we want it to be controlled, but if we do, that you might just end up, kind of in a world where we're banning all the AI models out of other countries, like we are with trying to ban TikTok, but then not being able to do it and going back and forth. And so it's I don't know what the answer is.
Well, approach this at your own risk, because people can be inundated with all the information about AI out there. And what I would recommend, and Kyle, you can give your 2 cents here, is tread carefully as we continue to evolve in artificial intelligence. As some of the older legacy type AI begins to go to the wayside, new models are approaching. Approach it carefully. We are not going to endorse AI in any way, like use this model, not use this model, do this, don't do this. We are just simply stating what's out there and what we see as the potential problems that could be, but also the potential benefits. So that's my 2 cents in regards to that.
Yeah, I would say, play with it, have fun with it, do not important things with it to understand it and maintain a level of knowledge around it, but be very hesitant to do anything business critical within it or provide it with any, sensitive information. That's where you really have to engage experts before you get to that level.
It may be beneficial and using it on a very high level. If you're using some sort of AI model to help you write policies and procedures for your environment, make sure that, hey, write policies and procedures for the Acme company. And, this is the guidance, and always go back over it with either a internal subject matter expert or external to be able to say, okay, we kind of use Chat GPT to try to create this, but we need to go through it and make sure that it applies to our specific, these AI models are great for setting up a basic infrastructure or even basic coding. But don't trust all coding that comes out of artificial intelligence. Make sure you have people that can go through it intelligently and make sure that it is not a risk to your company.
Absolutely.
Well, excellent. So everybody, we know that this was a first stab outside of the gate of our regular PCI requirements, but we're excited about trying to bring content to you guys. And again, this is more about InfoSec, bringing guests on, talking about InfoSec and what's coming. And we're both very excited to be taking this leap together.
Yep. I would 100% echo everything Andy said. Glad we had a chance to talk with you all today. And if you have any feedback or, questions, you want to reach out, give us, guidance on what you think we should be doing with the podcast, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah. And our, you can always reach us at andy.kerr@lbmc.com. and kyle.hinterberg@lbmc.com as well. So reach out to us. Let us know. If you'd like to be a guest speaker on the podcast, let us know. We'd love to discuss what your concerns are with IT security, what you see evolving, and what kind of information you want to get out there. Thanks, everybody. See you next time for Cybersecurity Sense.